Imagine you are standing at the edge of a hole in the earth. Not a serious matter, not a marked plot with a headstone and fresh flowers, just a narrow shaft dropping straight down into absolute darkness, somewhere in the mountains of northern Spain. The year is 430,000 BC. You are not Homo sapiens. That species does not exist yet. You are something older, something rawer, and you are holding a body. You are not alone. There are others with you. And together, one by one, you lower 28 bodies into that pit. No food goes with them, no hunting tools, no practical object of any kind that might suggest you believed they were going somewhere they would need to survive. Just the dead. Stacked in the dark, in a chamber so deep and so silent that no predator would ever find them, no flood would ever reach them, and no living person would stumble across them by accident. Someone thinged this place. Someone made this decision, and then someone left. Archaeologists would not find this pit until 1976. They named it Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. And when they finished cataloging everything inside, they found exactly one object that was not a body, a single hand axe, carved from red quartzite. Perfectly symmetrical, never used. They named it Excalibur, and for decades nobody could explain what it was doing there. It was not a weapon left for protection. It was not food. It does not serve survival function whatsoever. It was simply placed, with intention, among the dead. Here's the question that should unsettle you. The people who carried those bodies into that pit had no writing, no religion we can name, no philosophy, no theology, no organized belief system of any kind that we have evidence of. And yet, they did this. They gathered their dead. They have a specific place. They made a specific gesture. They left something behind. So the question is not whether ancient humans mourned their death. The question is, what does it mean that they did it 430,000 years before you? Scientists have a term for the moment a species crosses a specific line. They call it the Symbolic Behavior Threshold. It is the point where a creature stops reacting to death, the way a wolf abandons a pack member's body, the way a crow circles once and moves on, and starts responding to it. Start building something around it. Ritual, meaning, story. For a long time, the assumption was clean and comfortable. Homo sapiens crossed that threshold. Everyone else did not. Grief, in the way you and I understand it, was supposed to be our invention, our burden, our lonely distinction from every other creature on Earth. Then came Shanidar Cave. In the mountains of northern Iraq in 1957, archaeologist Ralph Selecki began excavating a Neanderthal burial site estimated at 60,000 years old. What he found did not fit the comfortable assumption at all. The body of a middle-aged male, laid carefully on his side. And in the soil surrounding him, dense, concentrated clusters of pollen. 8 species of wildflowers, most of them known for medicinal properties, packed around a body that someone had clearly arranged with care. Someone picked flowers for a Neanderthal. Think about that for a second. But the flowers were only the beginning. What stopped Selecki, what stops every researcher who looks closely at this burial, is something else entirely. This man was old for his era. His arm had been amputated at the elbow, likely in youth. The bone healed cleanly over decades. He had severe arthritis. One eye was almost certainly blind. By every brutal calculation of Paleolithic survival, this man should have been dead years before he was buried. He wasn't. His community kept him alive, fed him, protected him, carried him possibly when he could no longer walk. This is not the behavior of a species that does not understand loss. This is the behavior of a species that understood it so deeply they refused to accelerate it. Psychologists call the engine behind this terror management theory. The framework, built by researcher Jeff Greenberg in the 1980s, proposes something radical. That every ritual humans have ever constructed, every monument, every religion, every story ever told around a fire is at its core a psychological wall. A defense against one single unbearable awareness, that you are alive. That you know it, and that one day, without negotiation, you will not be. The Neanderthal who picked those flowers was not primitive, he was terrified. In exactly the way you are terrified. And he did the only thing any of us have ever done with that terror. He made it beautiful, but here is where the story stops being ancient. 34,000 years ago, on the frozen plains of what is now Russia, 2 children were buried together. Head to head, facing opposite directions as if they had been placed in conversation with each other across the boundary of death. They were approximately 10 and 12 years old, and they were covered entirely from skull to feet in hand-sewn ivory beads. 10,423 beads in total, carved individually from mammoth ivory, threaded by hand onto clothing that no longer exists, leaving only the beads behind in the shape of the bodies they once dressed. Researchers calculated the labor. Each bead took approximately 45 minutes to produce. 10,000 beads, you do that math. Someone, or more likely an entire community, spent the equivalent of years preparing 2 children for a burial. Children who should have outlived everyone who buried them. This is the Sunghir site, and it doesn't let you look away, because this is not survival behavior. You do not spend years carving decorative beads if your only concern is making it through winter. This is grievance that became ferocious. Grief that needed to do something with his hands because standing still with the loss was unbearable. Every bead was an hour-someone thing to spend with those children instead of accepting that they were gone. Now look at what happened next. Because Sunghir was not an exception. Across 30,000 years of human burial sites, the pattern repeats with an insistence that feels almost desperate. The more traumatic the death, the younger the body, the more unexpected the loss, the more labor the community poured into the ritual, more objects, more ceremony, more time. Grief, it turns out, has always been something humans needed to build. The question that Sunghir leaves hanging in the cold Russian air is the same question Cima de los Huesos left in the dark Spanish cave. It is not, did these people feel loss? It is, why did feeling loss make them reach for their hands and start doing something? In 2013, deep inside a cave system in South Africa called Rising Star, a team of researchers squeezed through a passage so narrow that only the smallest members of the expedition could fit. 12 inches wide in places, completely dark, the kind of place a rational mind refuses to go. What they found on the other side stopped the field of paleoanthropology cold. Bones. Hundreds of them, belonging to a species called Homo naledi, a hominin so small, so ancient, so neurologically primitive that researchers initially assumed the bones had simply fallen there by accident. Washed in by a flood, perhaps. Carried in by predators, except there was no evidence of flooding. No predator marks on the bones. No other animal remains mixed in. The only way those bodies arrived in that chamber was if someone carried them there, through that 12-inch passage, in complete darkness. Deliberately, Homo naledi had a brain 1/3 the size of yours. By every metric we use to measure cognitive sophistication, this species should not have been capable of intentional burial. And yet, here's the part nobody likes to talk about. The Rising Star chamber shows signs of repeated use. This was not an accidental deposit. This was a place communities returned to, across generations, to leave their dead. A species that could not write, could not speak in any language we would recognize, possibly could not reason abstractly in the way you do right now, was making a specific place for its dead. Was choosing, again and again, to carry them somewhere intentionally rather than leave them where they fell. But it gets weirder, because on the other side of the world, 15,000 years ago, a culture called the Natufians made a different choice entirely. The Natufians were hunter-gatherers living across what is now Israel, Jordan, and Syria, and when their people died, they did not carry them away. They did not build a separate place for the dead. They buried them under the floors of their homes, directly beneath the ground where the living ate, slept, raised children, and grew old. Generation after generation, the dead accumulated below. The living walked above them every single day. To a modern mind, this feels disturbing. It feels like something that should have a clinical name, but archaeologists who study Natufian sites read it differently. This was not pathology. This was intimacy. This was a culture that had decided collectively that the boundary between the living and the dead was not a wall to be built. It was a threshold to be maintained. The dead were not gone. They were underneath. Here. Reachable. Still, in some architecture of belief, we can no longer fully reconstruct part of the household. And here's the fracture line that runs straight from the Natufian floor to your life right now. Every culture across every continent, across all of recorded and unrecorded human history has built some version of this, some mechanism for keeping the dead close enough to feel. The ancestral altar, the cemetery visit, the chair left empty at the table, the contact you cannot bring yourself to delete from your phone because seeing their name still there feels like a small, manageable lie you need to keep telling yourself. This is not superstition. This is not irrationality. This is a neurological need so ancient it predates our species. The need to not fully let go. The need to keep the dead somewhere, under the floor, in a cave, in a pit in the mountains of Spain, where you can still, in some imprecise and devastating way, be near them. The Natufians did not invent grievance. They just had the architectural honesty to build their houses on top of it. So let us go back to the red hand axe. Excalibur has sat at the edge of this story since the beginning. A single object in a pit of 28 bodies, in a cave in Spain, 430,000 years ago. And now that you have walked through the flowers of Shanidar, the ivory beads of Sunghir, the impossible darkness of Rising Star, and the floors of the Natufian homes, you are finally equipped to understand what Excalibur actually was. It was not a tool. It was not a weapon. It was not practical in any sense that archaeology can measure. It was a gift, the first known object in the entire history of this planet given to someone who could no longer use it, placed with intention, in the dark, by hands that understood, on some level that did not require language or theology or written philosophy, that the person they were leaving behind had mattered, that their mattering deserved a physical gesture. That departure, even into whatever darkness they believed came next, should not happen empty-handed. This is not a story about death. This is not a study about primitive burial customs. This is not a historical curiosity about species that no longer exist. This is about the moment meaning was invented. And here is where the mirror turns directly toward you, the gravestone with the dates and the single line someone spent 3 weeks trying to write, the funeral playlist you agonized over because you needed the music to say what you could not, the photograph kept in a wallet long past the point of practicality, the anniversary you mark quietly, alone, every year, for someone most people around you have already stopped mentioning, the comment left on a page that will never be read again, 3 words, a heart, the year. All of it is Excalibur, every single gesture, 43,000 centuries of the same reaching hand, the same unbearable need to make the loss mean something beyond the biological fact of it. But now look at what we have done with that inheritance. Modern society has industrialized death with an efficiency that would have been unrecognizable to every culture that came before us. We have professionalized the body, handed it to strangers within hours of the last breath. We have abbreviated the ritual. 3 days of bereavement, then back to your desk, back to your inbox, back to the performance of functionality. We have digitized the mourning, a post, a thread, a story that disappears in 24 hours, grievance with an expiration date built into the platform. And quietly, without anyone making a formal announcement, we have stopped building places for our dead. Not physically, we still have cemeteries, but psychologically, the Natufian floor, the dark cave, the specific sacred geography of loss that every human culture before ours maintained. That architecture is collapsing. We are the first civilization in 430,000 years of human burial behavior that has quietly, deliberately removed the ritual from death and replaced it with efficiency. Psychologists studying grievance in the 21st century are finding something that should not surprise you but does. Complicated grievance, prolonged, destabilizing, identity-fracturing loss is rising, not because people are weaker, not because death has become more common, but because the structures we evolved to process death through, the ritual, the community, the physical gesture, the kept object, the specific place, have been quietly dismantled in the name of moving on. We took away Excalibur, and we told people to be fine by Monday. So here is what 430,000 years of human burial behavior actually tells us. The first takeaway is scientific, and it is uncomfortable. Grief ritual is not a cultural invention. It is not something civilization taught you. It is a biological drive so ancient it predates language, predates religion, predates the version of Homo sapiens standing in your mirror right now. When you feel the compulsion to mark a death, to gather, to make something, to leave something behind, you are not being sentimental. You are running the oldest program in the human operating system, one that Homo naledi was running before your species existed. The second takeaway is about the world you are living in right now. Every society that came before ours, without exception, across every continent, across hundreds of thousands of years, understood intuitively that death required a container, a ritual, a held space where loss could be processed communally, physically, over time. We are the first civilization to have systematically dismantled that container and called the dismantling progress. And the psychological cost of that decision is only beginning to surface. The third takeaway is the one that stays with you. Meaning is not found. It is made with hands. In dark places, for people who can no longer see it. Every civilization that has ever existed figured this out independently, in isolation, across hundreds of millions of years of human suffering, and they all arrived at the same answer. You honor the dead not because it helps them. You honor the dead because the act of honoring transforms something unbearable in you. The ritual is not for the person in the ground. The ritual was always for the person holding the flowers, threading the beads, carrying the body through the dark. Excalibur was not a gift to the dead. It was a gift the living gave themselves. And here's the question I want you to sit with. The one I want you to take into the comments, into your conversations, into the quiet of whatever room you are in right now. If you could design one ritual, one specific, deliberate, physical gesture for the people you love to perform when you are gone, what would it be? Think about it, because somewhere in your answer is everything that matters to you. Every value, every relationship, every fear you have spent your life arranging yourself around. The ritual you would choose is the life you are actually living. We started in a pit in Spain, in the dark, 430,000 years ago. 28 bodies and one red hand axe and a question nobody has ever been able to fully answer. We are still in that pit, all of us, still trying to figure out what to leave behind. Still reaching into the dark with something in our hands, hoping the gesture is enough. It has always been.